our wellness panel this year is movement of energy. So thank you so much for joining us. We've got an amazing array of talent up here on the stage. And we are representing Tai Chi, yoga, ecstatic dance, Qigong, and sacred dancing, all of that. So thanks for joining us. I think it'll be a great panel, and I'm going to give the mic to Nick.
Good morning. I am Nick Navarez. I'm the producer of this year's Crestone Energy Fair, and I'm here to introduce this panel. Thank you so much. All right. So on stage, this year's wellness panel theme is movement of energy for wellness. The panel will cover insights on energy movement practices from experts including Qigong, Tai Chi, traditional ecstatic dance, martial arts, and yoga. Dr. Kim, ND, LAC, has been practicing and teaching natural medicine for over 30 years. She is a licensed naturopathic doctor, acupuncturist, medicinal herbalist, and Qigong instructor that is committed to healing with natural medicine. She has taught healing modalities for Shift Network, Healing Our Earth, and Qigong and yoga workshops worldwide. She is the founder of sacredunity.org, a nonprofit retreat center for body, mind, and spirit that will open in 2025 in Crestone. And now, Dr. Kim.
Thank you. Well, I feel very honored to have everybody here on the stage. And I know there's so many talented people in our community, and it was not out of thoughtlessness to ignore anyone else. I'm glad you guys got to experience things with Polina this morning. If you made the Nam yoga, that was amazing. We have so many people in Wellness Village, but I am very honored to bring just a variety of folks to the stage today. I'm not going to spend a ton of time doing a bio because I want them to talk about themselves just a little bit if they're up to that. But we have Sharron Rose, we have John Milton, we have Taiji Bill or Bill Smith, we have Cheney, Signa Cheney, and we have Elza as well. And I'm going to kind of pass the mic to them. So where we're going to start today is just kind of sharing something about yourself and also your teachings as they relate to the movement of energy. And a lot of our speakers, and myself included, obviously we work with breath work, we work with other types of meditative practices. So this is not exclusive of that. If you feel that that is something you'd like to talk about, please share. Because we know that movement is also breath and prana and chi. And so certainly we're going to do a little movement today, just a little bit. We're a panel, but I think we can do a little. But if you would like to share something just about yourself, whether it's about your, a little bit about your experience, because a lot of people here in the audience in Crestone probably know most of these folks, but maybe you don't. And we have a lot of people on our live stream, and I would just really like to have you guys share a little bit, so if you don't mind. And you guys do have a mic. Who would like to start? Or do I have to pick someone? I can pick someone if you want. Sharron, you ready? Okay. Okay.
Global namaste to you all. About me. From an amazing childhood in ballet, theater, opera, New York dancer and modern dance, I discovered by synchronicity Indian classical dance and was given fellowships from our wonderful US government that does those kinds of things. To go to India and live with Sitara Devi, Bollywood star and queen of North Indian dance, and that changed my life. I not only learned to embody all the myths, all the deities, even the demons of Indian classical mythology and spirituality, but learned yoga and deep, deep immersion in all of the India traditions, whether they be Hindu or Islamic. And from that immersion, I went into reconstructing the music, dance, and ritual from the temples of Egypt, and also studying the psychophysical method of neurosensory reeducation and also craniosacral therapy, and on and on. I've been making films actually since '78, but we started our company Sacred Mysteries in 2000. We've made many films about healing, shamanism, yoga, and more. And most recently, I'm finishing up with our dear Doug Beechwood, Quantum Chi. I've been working with for the last 7 years, Qigong masters, and also making music for the divine feminine. I'm on a big project. So I combine sacred movement, Qigong, and the sacred movement from many, many traditions. And I've seen the focus really is on healing and wellness. And I am thrilled, I must say that I am so thrilled about this drive now in the political world to make America healthy. Whatever you think of these people, what they're bringing to make us aware of what's happening to our children and to us in terms of the toxicity of the environment and the food and how we really can learn. And that's what I love about Kim and everyone here. We're really here to help bring wellness, true wellness to everyone. I'm Sharron Rose. Oh, and by the way, John Milton and our dear Kim are in Quantum Chi.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I got involved with Qigong back in 1950s. It was a wonderful restorative, regenerative practice. And even as a teenager, it was an amazing thing to be introduced to that. And then life took me to a number of immersions in China and Japan and Asia in general, especially in the Himalayas. In fact, I taught Tai Chi in Nepal and Kathmandu for 5 or 6 years. It's a wonderful experience. I live here in Crestone now, and I'm the founder of a group called The Way of Nature. The focus of that includes the path of energy, but we also include the path of the heart and the path of wisdom. So we embrace these different lineages that honor those different pathways and try to integrate them into a way of common ground connection to outer nature, inner nature, and true nature. And the purpose behind that is to provide a much deeper foundation for the environmental movement and regenerative initiatives around the planet. I was very involved in the old days helping get the Environmental Policy Act established, came up with the first proposal for that in the 60s, and have been very much involved with the environmental movement ever since those early days when we helped to birth it in the 60s. It seems like we are entering a new phase when we need a much deeper spiritual foundation for regenerative society, as Sharron was mentioning. So we like to think that the way of nature is one pathway that provides a kind of regenerative system of deep connection to your home ecosystem, to the plants and the animals and the beings of nature that are part of your territory. And the processes we've pioneered have to do with bonding with outer nature, so becomes part of your family. When you have a family relationship with nature, your whole attitude towards other life forms and other species shifts. So that's been a core focus for our work. And it also focuses on universal practices to connect with true nature and source. So it's been a great adventure opening up this way of nature process. And we're based here in Crestone as our main home base. We also have the 300-acre Sacred Land Sanctuary just north of town, and we hold all of our retreats up there. In fact, I came down here today in the middle of an energy cultivation retreat, utilizing the techniques from Castaneda, Qigong, Tai Chi, and cultivation practices from Tibet like Salong and then purification breaths. And it's been wonderful to see In fact, most of the members of my retreat are going to be coming down here to honor the expression of this kind of concept in solar energy, wind energy, and the renewable energy movement that this beautiful gathering so fantastically represents. So that's a little bit about my path and why I'm here. Help a bit.
Thanks, Jeff. Good morning, everyone. I'm Bill Smith. I've been doing Tai Chi since the mid-'80s, and I will tell you that I started in Shotokan Karate, and in the mid-'80s I was training Shotokan in a wonderful place called Bisbee, Arizona. And I was training in a building called the Golden Flower Building. It was owned by this mysterious shadow figure named John P. Milton. And it took a minute, and through my Shotokan instructor, I actually got to meet John, and my other first teacher was Bill Stevens. Hey, Bill. And he's not with us on this earth any longer. But so I got my start with John. I spent my first 5 years of Tai Chi practice in his school in Bisbee and then continued on. In 1993, my Tai Chi path shifted dramatically. I met Grandmaster David Chin, and I became a formal disciple of his, and I trained with him up until his passing in 2020. And so I've been teaching full-time since 1992. I've done a couple of university research projects as a consultant for Tai Chi for older adults, and Tai Chi for Parkinson's patients. And I currently also live in Crestone, and I am enjoying my life. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Signa. I started practicing yoga when I was 18, and that was in 1988. So I've been studying and practicing a variety of styles of yoga for the past 36 years. I'm 54 now. I always feel like one of the best things that happened to me was finding yoga at that point in my life. I was also a dancer. I've been a dancer all my life. I've always been in dance classes. I've studied different kinds of belly dance, African dance, jazz, modern. Never really did ballet, but somehow circumventing that helped me not have a form that liberated me later, maybe. Well, in the 90s, when I was in college, I got super into movement medicine. I started studying Gabriel Roth. I got into open floor. There's actually a form called movement medicine, but what all of my experience, I was also an athlete all of my life. So since the age of 6, I played basketball and soccer and did some track and some softball. So a lot of experience in my life moving in different ways, and all of that has brought me to a place where one of my greatest joys is my own sort of very unique yoga practice, which looks a lot like breath work and sound work with movement. And I really enjoy ecstatic dance, just moving authentically. My goal with movement is always to first come to a place of stillness and presence with myself. And then as I begin to move with all these different tools and practices that I've learned over my life, to access what is really needed and what is going to be healing for me. So I'm really honored to be here and to share with you. And I think that when we think about movement, it's nice to think about movement medicine, that we all have this available to us, and that we let the movement begin wherever we're at. It doesn't matter if we have a history of movement or not. We all have this body that speaks to us, and we have a way of moving that takes us into feelings of release and transformation and just feeling better and feeling good.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. It's such an honor to be with the wisdom and the embodiment that is here on this panel. My name is Elzabieta. I began my journey with Qigong and movement therapeutically 24 years ago in my late teens. I was practicing a system of energy medicine and got connected into Qigong as a way to support cultivation of my clinical work that I was doing in various wild places, I'll say. I grew up in Denver and lived up and down Colfax my whole life, worked in community health education, and worked with some pretty high-risk populations, difficult spaces that people had found themselves in, and kind of got thrown to the wolves as a teenager doing energy medicine in jails and halfway houses. And really, at the beginning of my career, I started to understand how movement, when restricted, is really the source of distortion and disease and breakdown in our bodies. And so from that very early experience of working with Qigong, working with energy medicine, studying classical Chinese medicine, I started to become fascinated with the process of how movement is the organizing principle of our reality, whether that be the movement of our thoughts, the movement of how our blood or our qi flows through our being, or how we actually stand in ourselves and move. So my fascination with movement continued to martial arts. It continued to Rolfing and gait repatterning and working with movement as a therapy, not only for myself, but for my clients, as a way that, like what Signa said, is each one of us has our own unique relationship to how we move. And we all have the birthright to move with ease and to move with grace and to move with flow. And even people who are the most down and out or the most accomplished and evolved within their capacity can continue to grow in the expression of movement, whether that be physically, energetically, or even emotionally. So I'm excited to be here and excited to hear all the wisdom that is about to get dropped on you guys out there listening about, you know, how we can all wake this up within ourselves. It's a birthright. It's just an opportunity to choose. I think in each of these pathways that you guys talked about is there are ways that we can open. So I'm excited to connect more.
Thank you. And I love that everybody was bringing up, because, you know, as I'm thinking about movement of energy panel, just bringing up, like all of you did, whether it's breathing, connection with nature, healing work with people. You know, I think about just needling people and moving chi, and just how important that shift is for people. And it can be done on a subtle body level and a real physical level as well. So thank you for bringing that up, because, you know, I always learn as I do these panels too, so I appreciate it. So my next question, and you guys feel free to elaborate as much as you want. How do you individually feel sacred movement practices help people reach a state of wellness? And I think some of you already touched on that so far. But, you know, just a little exploring about what you've seen maybe in your practices and your work with people, that as they start to do some of these practices, how they might be changing and how their lives, I mean, I think we all probably have a story of more than one, and maybe our own story, about how our own movement experience changed and shifted us, you know, either out of a stuck pattern or just seeing the world in a bigger way. But I kind of want to touch on that with each of you. So the question again was, and feel free to elaborate, how sacred movement practices have helped you and others reach a state of wellness, maybe a story, a personal story, or of a student, or an experience you might have had. So thank you. And we can go the other way. Elza, if you want to start, it's fine, or we can.
So what comes up for me is actually watching my students move in the dojo. So when I started teaching karate, I realized it was kind of an extension of my clinical work with people, teaching them how to be embodied and be connected. And the martial arts path, as it relates to the structure and the function of our body, requires us to maintain balance. It requires us to have horizontal alignment and vertical alignment. And when my little students come in at age 3, they come in and they're wild and they're running all over the place and they're spinning in circles and they're having so much expression within themselves. And then when you teach them how to anchor their energy, how to stand in alignment, and you watch that expression have a direction or a orientation to like a channel of expression, it allows for this sense of organization and this sense of embodiment and this sense of power and this sense of connection to something almost bigger than themselves. So watching the little ones have these connections to what alignment means, each of our own tensegrity, our alignment in our posture, our alignment in our movement at this very young age. And then you see when they get to be 6 or 7 or 16 or even, growing up in the dojo, their potential that translates to how they walk in the world and how they can actually carry that potential as a source of expression, whether that be they're an artist or they're, very interested in engineering or math or something that is, requiring them to cultivate some sort of knowledge or awareness. When they have a physical connection to how to move energy in their body, they walk with confidence, which I think is such an important thing for our wellness, to feel like we belong, to feel like we have purpose. They express with ease, which is another important element for us to feel like our uniqueness can be brought out to the world, and give and receive can be in a balanced state. And so this idea of having these young people cultivate a connection to themselves so that they can really be embodied as they grow into their bodies and grow into their expression of themselves. It's as if they have already set the tone for what wellness means, because on a holistic level, they're like tuned up and ready to express themselves.
Oh, when I think about that, I think that, I feel and my experience is that we are many facets. Humans, we're like a great mandala, each one of us. There's so many parts of us. And the two most dominant parts seem to be the mind and the physical body. And we dance through our life, we grow, we have experiences, and the mind is always this thing that we're in relationship with. It's like, this is a supercomputer. I'm supposed to be in control of this supercomputer, but so many times it's in control of me, right? So we have that experience of practices or getting into nature that allow our minds to be calm and quiet and at ease, and we come back to our true essence. And then we have our bodies, which, when we're in pain, it sucks. Like, being in pain is a very real experience. When our bodies are in pain, everything is affected. We're kind of locked into this prison. And you had used the word sacred movement practices, which I love that invitation to ask ourselves, what is sacred movement to me, to you? And I translate that to be ancient practices. Practices have been around for a long time that have wisdom that we can learn from, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I have found that being in structures, systems of movement, and learning them and trying them and having a newness of like, okay, I'm going to learn this hatha style of yoga or kundalini yoga, and they're very, very different. And let me start by just really trying to learn what these teachers are offering to me. And then I have experiences I've never had before, and I go places in my body that I didn't know I could go. And the unhinging of the emotional realms and the spiritual realms of feeling connected to spirit happens through the body. So much of our unhinging, our unlocking really does happen through the body. The release of the mind, the monkey mind, it happens through the body. So if we can find an art, a movement art that we feel drawn to or feels enjoyable or gives us something, it's a very powerful It's a very powerful choice to give time to that. It's easy for us to stay in the mind world, be on the to-do list. We're kind of trained to be that way in our society and our school systems. So choosing to be a person who wants movement medicine for myself or for you, for yourself, is a very powerful choice. And it does require some time. And I loved, as a young person, sampling so many different movement arts. And what I moved towards was the ones that I really enjoyed, because those are the ones I stuck with. And these bodies are vehicles of sensation. We are a very unique creature in that we can smell things, we can taste things, we can see things, we can feel things. And even the most subtle feeling, like just right now, just notice the sunshine on your skin. And notice the breeze if it comes by and just whispers across your face, into your hair. It's very sensual. And this sensual part of us is very repressed in general in our society. And in the movement arts, I find that it puts me in touch with my core essence that wants to experience pleasure, that wants to experience freedom, that wants to make noise, that wants to breathe deeply. And all of my life, I would consider that I've been a movement artist or a movement practitioner. And the most powerful, powerful piece of that for me, like you ask sacred movement, what does that do? It has become sacred for me when I turn on the breath and I turn on sound. I can do anything that's movement oriented, and if I'm not activating my breath or plugging into some sort of breath work that I'm aware of, or even just expanding what my breath is doing naturally, I'm missing out. So if I can move my body, expand my breath, and then, wow, let's bring in some sound. This huge awakening can happen in terms of my own body healing itself.
Well said. I'm going to tell a couple stories. The first one is my story. I was in my late teens. I was 19 years old, and I was in a working rock band, and everything went completely sideways, and I quit the band, quit the people, quit the party, quit everything. And I did yoga and meditation for a full year to get my health and my sanity back on track. And that's where I discovered the power, the healing power of movement. I want to definitely credit Hatha Yoga and give a shout out to Lilius Folan and PBS, because that's where I would practice. The only place in the 80s, that's the only place to find it, right? So I'm sitting there practicing. I can remember the first time I really did a bridge posture and how it changed my breath, changed my whole process. And so I kind of found that for myself in that way. Later, as I got into the Tai Chi world, and that frankly was like coming home from all the things I've been doing that part. As soon as I felt that Tai Chi world, it was just like this. I don't care if it takes all of this life and half of the next. I'm going to figure out how to do this, right? So it really hit me that way. And so if you find something in your life, movement-wise, that resonates with you that strongly, follow that. It's like, listen. So fast forward, I'm teaching Tai Chi for professionally, and I'm working with a whole bunch of different people. And I had this insight, two insights. First one was, as a child, as a baby, nobody ever teaches you how to move. They encourage you to take steps. And then later in life, maybe you learn some karate do or some dance or something of that nature, sports. And then we learn movement through those kind of stylized movement through those activities. And but otherwise, everything else we know about movement, we're just imitating the adults around us. That's, I always say, imitating the totally integrated, well-balanced adults around us. Yeah. Okay. Well, so it was like I say, I was fairly deep in my process before I really came to that understanding of what is movement and how are we learning it, and what role does it play in culture, and so in a lot of ways, a lot of the ways we hold our body is a mirror of that enculturation, and to find true freedom means to break out of that. So I ran across a gentleman, Dr. Robert Glazer. He was the head of the Florida Bioenergetic Society. He studied directly with Alexander Lowen in bioenergetic movement, and right. And so, and through that process, and also through the what Signa mentioned about the emotions, through the Tai Chi world, really getting that elegant system of codification we call the 5 elements, and how that plays out in every aspect of our existence. So I was working with a student, a particular student, and she came to me 2 months into her Tai Chi practice with me and said, every time you say to put my mind in my lower abdomen, all I see is a black pit of despair. And I was like, oh my God, it's like, this is terrible. And I didn't know what to do with it. So I found Dr. Bob, and we worked some things out. I did some bioenergetics for myself, and eventually this woman found a path that led her back into a series of memories of why she could not put awareness into this region of her body. And that blew my world apart as far as, wow, the body is this amazing repository of our vitality and our life force and our spirit in form, but it also becomes this storehouse for everything that's ever happened to us, good, bad, or ugly. And if you're doing any kind of motion, I would say, it's like if you're relaxing these larger muscle bodies, at some point or another, you're going to have to acknowledge the emotional content in there, even if it's to say bye. It's like so you don't have to wallow in it. But sometimes there's pieces of it that really need to be addressed specifically in order to make a progress. So I'll tell one more story. So I was teaching at a senior health care center, and this is people 75 plus. And there was a woman there, a lovely lady, and it was in her early 80s. And when she first started, her husband would park the car as close to the door to the room as possible and help her up the curb. And he had to open the door. The door was too heavy for her to push. Right? So we get into our process, and 6 or 8 months down the road, they were parking at the end of the parking lot. She's striding down the sidewalk, boom, blow that door open. But there was one pivotal moment that I'll always remember that linked it together for me. One morning, we were a Monday morning class. I always start with, oh, how was your weekend? And this lady says very sweetly, she says, I went into the ocean for the first time. And I was like, all right, first time this year or first time ever? And she was like, ever. She had been a lifelong asthmatic, had been totally terrified of the water or getting into water at all. And for some reason, she was able to do it. And I was like, oh, and it's just all these lights went off. I was like, okay, so what's the water? There's the water element, right? So we're doing Tai Chi and Qigong, which is helping your kidneys and developing that kidney channel, the dominant channel in your legs, and then she could actually go into the water. And I was like, this is amazing, right? So that's kind of my path, and just to watch that process of people unfold. I think you had said elegantly to start where you are, wherever it is in the movement process, and pick it up from there. If you can find a place, jump into it and go. And thank you.
Well. Sacred movement. It's interesting that in my own case, a lot of the movement experience arose from when I was 7 years old. I went out and did my first period of a week alone in the wilderness. I grew up on a family farm in New Hampshire, and we were surrounded by wild places in the White Mountains. And I noticed when I went out that the animals, the plants, all the beings of nature began to come close and become very intimate, friendly, and not have any fear. And I began to realize that I was part of a much larger family than the immediate biological family. It was a much bigger context that I was beginning to get to know at a much deeper level. We ran a pretty tough farm up there. We did haying by hand, and a lot of it was pretty hard physical work. And I hadn't had much chance to really go deeper into what nature was. So through that early vision quest experience, I began to realize that there were secrets held by nature that I was only beginning to realize. As time went on, I began doing this about once, twice, sometimes 3 or 4 times a year, including a month-long retreat in the Olympic Mountains in Washington when I was 16. And I had been a salmon fisherman. Then when I finished my job, I went to the Olympics, spent a month in the middle of the Olympic range, meditating, going deep into nature, and just feeling the harmony and balance of nature. And one of the things I learned was that nature holds in a sense, a kind of balanced and integrated way. Even when it's storming or hurricaning or cycloning, there's an inherent balance in nature that is an equivalent balance to what is the potential in our own bodies and in our own energy systems. I began to be fascinated by how nature expressed that through movement, the way the aspen trees twinkle in the fall when they're turning orange, the way the water curls when it's moving down a beautiful stream, the way the wind sounds when it's rustling in the grass. I was over in Denmark teaching recently, and I was amazed by these beautiful fields of grass and how they wave so perfectly with the wind, absolutely in perfect balance and harmony. And I began to realize that there was a potential for the same thing in ourselves. We co-evolved with nature over millions of years. Every cell in our body co-evolved with natural patterns and natural processes. How could we come back into a relationship with those things and begin to express it through our movement? And through that, I began to become entranced by sacred movement. Sacred meaning we were moving in harmony with the beauty of outer nature and the harmony of outer nature, and also touching into the deep stillness, spaciousness, and clarity of the inner space of our source being, which is really the source nature of ourselves. So I began to explore how movement could point us back into the inner stillness and silence and space, and also to do movement that began to reinvigorate the kind of connection to the elements that Bill was just mentioning. And out of that came my engagement with Tai Chi and Qigong and a number of other systems of sacred movement, which I began to find had common principles of movement and connection. And so a lot of my life has been about how to essentialize those common ground principles of deep connection to ourselves and to nature. More recently, we've been utilizing movement in a process of exploring how the blockages and the obscurations when we come out of balance through cultural challenges and family challenges, maybe ancestral patterns, how we begin to hold those blockages in our physical body, in our energy body, in our chakras, our meridians, our vessels, in our essential energy body, the chakras and the meridians, in the emotional body that holds many of these patterns that then express through the physical body, and then in the mental body that begins to hold the belief systems and the contractions and the tensions that then express in the energy body and emotional body and begin to manifest in physical symptoms in the physical body. And then I went a little deeper with it and began to take a look at the ancestral patterns. Now, some of those ancestral patterns could create the mental blockages and obscurations that then fed on through all the systems until they finally reached the physical body. Then I went a little deeper and began to take a look at the cultural influences from modern media and began to be impressed by how powerful with our modern communication systems, these cultural patterns could be expressed, creating tension, obscuration, blockage, and impedance to the natural flows that was a part of our potential. And then finally, I began to notice there were even karmic traces that were carried along through one lifetime to another. So a group of us got together and spent 5 years exploring those levels from physical body to energy body to emotional body to mental body to ancestral pattern body to the body of cultural influence and the actual karmic traces that pass along through lifetimes. How could we release those? And we began to embody sacred movement patterns to release it to all those levels from physical on out to karmic trace. It took us 5 years to go through that and apply a number of techniques. We developed about 12 that we applied to each of those levels of the bodies that we are part of our makeup. And all of those did one basic common ground thing. They returned us back in the direction of the innate natural harmony that's our birthright. This is part of what we basically, we have all this in us. We're essentially perfect. And we have lost that perfection by becoming increasingly complicated and obscured. If we can find a way back to that natural simplicity, that's a great pathway. And movement is a key element in that recovery of the natural simplicity of our inherent birthright, of the harmony and beauty and joy of life. If you ask a Taoist master, I recently went over to China and spent several months with a number of the main Taoist monasteries in China, and with Din Din, for some of you who know her. She hosted me over there. If you ask a Taoist master, and I asked this question in a number of the monasteries, probably went to 6 or 7 of the main ones in China. The response when I asked this question, what's the real meaning of this lifetime? What are we here for? And the universal response I got was, we are here to enjoy this incredible gift of this lifetime. And to enjoy that, if we can remove the obstacles and the obscurations and rediscover what's our innate potential, what a fantastic thing that is. So the way of nature that's basically what we're up to these days. And thank you for your attention.
I'm doing mine. Well, let's see. I came into this life extremely emotional. And my mother put me into all of these arts classes so that I had a vehicle. And I am so grateful because it's given me a path through movement, through sound, through mudra, through all of these expressions to really walk the path of integration. And I've been so blessed to be part of living traditions of India, of, well, Egypt, sort of, and Qigong, and healing traditions, and Middle Eastern, and all of that. So the big turning point, let's go back a little. In college, I was introduced to improvisation. And we would work with emotions. My master's thesis was on emotions and movement. And I had my students, it was improvisation always within structure, so that you had structure in order to become free. And so we would do things like, what does it feel like? Show me anger. And everyone would do their anger, right? And I'd say, well, how does that feel in your body? What is going on with you? Or we would do, Shanti, peace. And what does that feel? And how does that feel different from anger? And then when I got to India and learned living with the living legend, Sitara Devi was extraordinary blessing. And there I encountered what we know as the tantric teachings, tantra in the aspect of embodying the highest aspects of yourself. These deities, they are just the highest aspects of your own being. And so I learned to embody, like if I'm feeling anger, I can become Durga, the great goddess of power and beauty, or even Shiva, the great god of transformation. And then I took that as I went out into the world and learned all these cultures. And I learned about, as we talked about, I think it was Signa, sensuality. Sensuality is our birthright, senses fully open. And I learned that true sensuality is a deeply, deeply spiritual experience. So when I learned to embody the Kundalini energy rising, or the beauty of Lakshmi, or from Egypt, Isis with her wings of light representing the fully enlightened energy body. And I looked from culture to culture at the symbols and myths and saw all of these connections that we have as human beings. And then Qigong. And that kind of brought the beauty of the flow, which I had encountered in romantic ballet. But it's a flow of the chi, a flow of the Shakti, a flow bringing that chi, that life force, that prana into the body for healing. And feeling that chi flowing through every cell. And then turning that into a song and dance of Guan Yin, the great healer, Guan Yin, the bodhisattva of compassion. In one hand, she holds a willow branch, showing that we should be flexible and fluid. And the other, she holds the nectar, the amrit, the nectar of life, the nectar of healing. This is sacred movement, the union of the flow, the mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum with her, so we're singing in, and the rhythm, and the grace, and the open-heartedness to receive from every tree, every plant, the true connection with nature and the cosmos. And then how to weave all this together into a beautiful healing modality.
I was going to share something, but I don't know. The bar is pretty high right now with everybody. So I know I'm the moderator, but I did want to share a story. I was very blessed in this life to have a very serious accident when I was young, 7. And I was told I wasn't going to walk again. And I was a classical ballerina in the Russian tradition, actually, working with the New York City Ballet, the preschool to that. And my whole life got dramatically changed when I told I was going to be in a wheelchair the rest of my life. And that was a number of orthopedic surgeons and people that my mom said, I don't like this answer. We'll find another one. And finally, I did find a sports doctor and started a great path of healing, which I think I'm still on. But that love of dance that I had, and at that time, and this is a long time ago, many of you may not remember this, but there was a movie called The Turning Point with Shirley MacLaine in it. And it was kind of how the dancers were aging, and there was a number of people in the movie. And even though I was really young, I was a teenager, I felt that like end of my career. It was kind of very magical that movie came out, even though these women are much older, but that was kind of my experience. It was like, I remember crying at the movie theater, like, oh, this is such a love that I have to be dancing like this and at this level. My teacher, Siskaya, she had defected from Russia and came to New York City by way of Greece, and she was a prima ballerina, and she was tough as nails. I think she was 4'8". But she was such a firehouse of power and love of dance. And just to go through that experience, and I think we've all had that in our lives, probably something that stopped our movement forward in our life, that it just gave me a great awareness of how can I move in a way that won't hurt me, even as a teenager, like how can I do that? And I had a wonderful experience when I got to college where I went to a college that had the American School of the Deaf there, and they were doing international dance and art and all this, and I learned sign language, and I joined this company, and there was forgive me for not remembering their names, but the choreographers that came to the American School of the Deaf wanted to work with deaf people with sign, and they had studied with Martha Graham. So I had this amazing experience of reconnecting myself with movement in a way that wasn't so hard on my body, and using modern and jazz and using sign language for expression we had a mixed company of people with sign, and it was just a great blessing and really beautiful to be able to reconnect with my body and know that I could keep moving, right? And I think, the biggest thing I've heard from elders that I've worked with, and I mean people in their hundreds, right? I've had the great joy of being able to work with some patients who have gotten past their century mark. And the thing they've told me is keep moving. Like, that's the key. Like, I love to read a book. One of my patients who was like 99 was like, I love reading a book and like being quiet in nature, but I have to make sure I walk. I have to make sure I connect. And, that comes up a lot. That's been coming up a lot for me with others in healing, is just however we need to move. And I know that's been mentioned by everybody, but, find a way that will help you connect, right, to yourself, to nature, to the beauty and the joy that's in this world, because it is certainly a way for us to be a whole being. So thank you. So we still have time, so we're not out of here yet. I had another question for everyone. It was, what is the best part? And this is kind of, one of those questions you're like, really? I have to come up with this? And just so you know, I really didn't give any prep to anybody here with their questions, and they're just masterful. And I'm not saying that just to gratiate everyone. I really love it. But the best part of doing a movement practice for your life and your work, right? And that can be, again, an experience with seeing others, like Elza, you mentioned the children, and that was wonderful, and everyone had a great thing. But just, because we have all different ages represented here, pretty much. I mean, we could probably go a little younger, but we're all, you have a young child, we have children grown, we have people we're working with in workshops, we're aging gracefully and being embodied. And thank you, Sharron, for getting up and moving a little bit, because I know it's great to hear us talk, but it is a movement panel, right? So, and we will be moving in a minute, I promise. We're gonna do a little movement. But again, that question is, what's the best part for you? And Sharron kind of started on this, and I'm gonna pass it around. But the best part of movement practices, sacred movement practices, for your life and work, how does that resonate with you a little more on a deep level, and maybe something that you found recently that might relate? Like, I know Bill and John were both mentioning, I think you said something great about the chaos, or, the way that technology, all its greatness, that we're on a speaker here, we're doing live feed, all that's a wonderful thing, but that ethos of being separated, so to speak, how that translates for you. So who would like to speak? You don't have to go in the same order. Anybody have a burning? I have to pick someone? You're going to make me pick? Okay.
The world is too much with us as of late. The divisiveness, the chaos, the distraction, everything that leads us away from our, as John would say, true source nature, has been, being a sensitive person who has, like John specifically, traveled the world, learning, immersing ourselves in ancient cultures and this spiritual path. It's been very difficult for me to see and feel this divisiveness and how people are so attached to their opinion and how the media is really pushing this divisiveness, and we're not speaking to each other or listening anymore from our hearts. And so what has really helped me in this time when I look in the outer world and I sometimes become so saddened and depressed is the sacred movement. This movement that encompasses the beauty and the power and the inclusiveness of all of these cultures, playing music, rhythms from India, from China, from Africa, from the Middle East, from the Latin countries. Throughout my life, dancing and playing with all of these amazing musicians and dancers of all of these cultures, and integrating, dialoguing with each other. And that all, it's the universal language that transcends all of this. So I have taken the time in order to deal with what's going on to really go inward a couple hours every day and dance. And at this point, at 75 years old, I am now integrating all of the different modalities of dance. I take a rhythm and my rhythms all speak from India, so this is called Dadra, ta ki ta di gi ta ki ta di gi ta, which is a waltz. And then I dance with every style to that rhythm, singing mantras, and it lifts me. Also, I have the pleasure now of working with one of the most amazing virtuosos of China, Jabing Chen, and the vibration, she plays this instrument, if you've never heard it, called the erhu, which is like the closest to a human voice speaking emotions I've ever heard. And it's taking me to this other higher vibrational level, and that's where I want us all to have a taste of that, because once you have a taste of that, and we all know, everyone here on the panel, and my dear John, once you have a taste of that, it shifts your whole consciousness and your whole way of seeing the world, and you start to see people from your heart.
Very inspiring. It might be nice to share something that's really inspired me. After all these years I've been offering essentially a really unique job. Part of my job is to take people into nature and leave them. And that could be leaving them for a few days, a few hours, a week, a few weeks, a month, several months, up to 6 months. And as you're in nature, of course, you begin to go through that bonding process to discover the big family from which we all derived, and which we're still all a part if we can simply re-recognize that. In the process of being, I've been doing this now I'm 86, or about to be 86, and I've been doing this for a good 60, 70 years. And one of the things that came through from all this experience in different cultures was seeing there were certain common ground principles of movement that help to reconnect people to their essence, to themselves, their true nature, to these wonderful bodies that we have, these senses that we're gifted with: sight, sound, taste, smell, touch, balance, and movement, energy, comprehension, emotions, and thoughts. Essentially, those 9 fields of experience are what we live with through our lifetimes, from birth to death: sight, sound, taste, smell, touch, balance, and movement, the experience of the play of emotions, display of energy and thoughts. And so I began to discover a way of going back to the indigenous cultures that I'd lived with. I spent a lot of time in Yucatan with my first Mayan teacher in 1959. I spent a year with him learning his system and process. And then went on to study in Tibet and the Himalayas for 15 years. And then quite a bit in China more recently and Tibet. But one of the big things I began to notice is that there are certain basic principles of movement from the indigenous cultures. For example, how to walk in a way that would be very silent, very quiet, how to place the foot and roll the foot into the earth in a kind of natural placement where you place the heel first and then flow along the outer rim of the foot, roll into the front foot, into the kidney 1 point bumping spring, and then when you knew that you're not making any sound, then you could place your full weight into that foot. But in the meantime, you kept the weight separated. And then when you knew that you're not going to make a noise, it was safe to shift the weight into that leg. Now that simple thing meant survival or death for many of our ancestors. Because when you hunt, you have to move in complete and total silence. So by placing a foot like that, if you're going to crackle a leaf, immediately you better lift off and place it somewhere else, and then place it silently, and then shift your weight into that foot, and then ground into that foot so you can move the other leg in a very stable, secure, balanced way that's very silent, smooth, and even. And eventually you get close enough to the game that you might be having to hunt for your kids and for your partner, and you can make the shot, and then your job is to make a clean kill. Absolutely clean, no suffering. And you also ask for the being of nature that's ready to release its body to step forth. And then you wait for the being of nature to step forth because it's ready to release. And then your job is to make the clean kill. Same is true with plants. If you're going out with plants are equally conscious. If you're going to harvest a plant, you need to ask the plant if this is the appropriate time and place and situation to receive that plant, and receive it in a deeply heartfelt, honoring, respectful way. So this kind of movement of indigenous peoples, where you flow with a very silent, spacious, and smooth way, just like a lion moves through the grass in the savannas of Africa, or the way in which your house cat moves when it's creeping up on a mouse. You can learn a lot from these secrets of movement. So I began to bring together a number of principles of movement that I then taught my students. Start walking like a cat, move like a cat. Be able to move your upper body just like a bird opens its wings. Enjoy that feeling of spaciousness. And then I took a look into some other systems, like Tai Chi and Qigong, which embodied from the ancient Taoist tradition these principles of movement, and brought them into Tai Chi, like relax. My teacher said, relax, relax, relax. You cannot move if your body is holding tension and contraction. If you're going to be present, you must relax. You can't be present if you're tense. The word attention is really interesting because it infers a kind of tension within the presence. And so the antidote to attention and the clarity that comes with attention is relaxation. We rarely are taught how important it is to relax in our lifetimes, in our movement. So we bring in some of these core principles like that, or lifting the spirit from the waypoint, lifting the body from lifting the spirit into the heavens, and the whole body hangs from that skyhook. And if you can move like that while you're doing that kind of movement I mentioned with the placement of the foot, wow. Then you begin to move in a very different kind of way. And you've unified ancient traditional principles of movement from indigenous peoples with principles of movement from the great systems of Tai Chi and Qigong. And then we go on and we learn how to connect deeply with plants and animals and elements and be inspired by the kind of movement they do. And so we might begin to embody how the wind moves or how the water curls in the stream. How do you move like that? How can you embody that movement? How can you express being one with that element, going through the process of connection, communion, union, mandalic experience, and then finally letting that whole thing express from true nature and source, from the inner stillness and silence and space. We call that system Gaia Flow. And it's a system of common ground movement, which is kind of unique to the way of nature right now, but hopefully it will go viral sometime in the future. And I wanted to share that because it's our system of movement inspired by nature and inspired by the indigenous peoples that knew how to move to stay alive and live in harmony with the rest of life.
Thank you, John. I'm going to reiterate a thing because I started in his school, so I will attest that the word relax was the word of 10,000 repetitions. And we got to hear that again and again and again. For me, oh gosh, principle. I used to say, you can't teach what you don't know. And I stood by that for years, right? It's like, but I came to a point where I was like, nope, that's not right. You can't teach what you don't embody. And that's became my new mantra, right? So principles, principles, principles. And when I started with John, I think we were first starting out, he said there was 108 principles. And I was like, gosh, I studied with you for a long time, and I don't think we ever went past principle number 36. I don't know. And so I've kind of boiled it down to just as an idea of accessibility. I call 3 big principles: relaxation, listening, and understanding. And we say those in Chinese. We say song, ting, and dong. That understanding is that kind of awakening of your nonverbal gut knowledge, that inner knowing. When you grok something in its entirety for yourself, you require no one else's explanation. That's when you go, ah, he said relax. and you actually find that in action. And I will tell a funny story mirroring on what he said. We used to practice in his building. I'm going to stand up for this, the Golden Flower building, and he lived in the apartment downstairs. And he would always come up to class after we had started. And when we were first starting, we're up there, and we're like, plunk, plunk, and he'd come up and he'd be like, God, it sounds like a herd of elephants up here. And we all know we were getting admonishment, like, oh man, that's terrible. And then as we were progressing, we're actually moving in just that way. And he'd come up, he'd go, oh, I didn't realize anybody was here. And that was our compliment. So thank you for that. Later in my life, I found another gentleman that became a mentor, and he told me some really profound things that changed my relationship with the whole process. And the first thing he said was, you live in electromagnetic jello. That is your atmosphere. And then the second thing he said is that the most sophisticated electromagnetic antenna transmitter, bar none, is your human body. And so this lit light bulbs of information for me, because in Tai Chi we're like going, oh yeah, this posture is good for your kidney channel, but then this posture is good for your lung channel. And you say, oh, you're just changing the shape of your antenna in the medium, in space, in the electromagnetic jello. So of course you're getting a different frequency, right? So that lit some things up and made some super connections for me. The second things, the next things that came up for me was the use of words. And we always say, my weight this and my weight that. And I will here tell you that there's no such thing as weight. There's no object called weight that you inherently possess. And if you're a guy going, what the hell is he talking about? Everything you know about weight and every unit of measure, every device to measure it, and every penchant for measuring it and tying it to your self-worth, us humans made up. There's no object called weight that you have. If you go off the planet, what do you become? All right, so if weight was a thing, where did it go? right? Astronauts would tell us these horrible stories about going into space. Oh yeah, that time we went out into space and it came out my ear, there it was, my weight, right? No such thing happens, right? So there's no inherent object called weight that you inherently possess at all. That does not exist. You have a relationship between the downward flowing energy we call gravity and the stability and fertility and the energetic vitality of the Mother Earth underneath your feet. And if you can find the song, the relaxation in between those 2 points, that's where things begin. And then you can find a liberated form of movement by surrendering the idea of weight. Let everything you feel and normally associate with that sensation fall out your feet into the earth, and you'll be good. So that's one idea. The second word that we use erroneously every single day is balance. My balance this, my balance that. I need better balance. I have to hold my balance. Hold my balance. Right? So this is a thing, right? So balance in my mind is a doing. It's another word that we erroneously use as a noun when in fact it is a verb. And I think so most of the time when people are asking for better balance, what they're requesting for is greater stability. They want to feel more stable. And that's a different thing. Right? So you don't do stability, you are stable, but you do balancing. So I always think, balancing, I'm like going, oh yeah, there I am on my slack rope, and I got a couple of spinning plates on my fingers and a bowl of water in my head. This was precarious from the very beginning, and so why would we quest for something so precarious? You can develop it and cultivate it, it's grand. But what we really are looking for, that departure point, is our fundamental stability. So finding that stability gives us a greater ease of movement. So these are kind of some of the insights I've come across all these years. I will not burden you with 108 or 36 principles. We got 3. And those 3 are the gateway to every other insight, every other method, every other way of achieving any of these benefits of movement. Thank you.
There are a number of well-known meditation teachers who would say, if you want to control the mind, control the breath. And in order to control the breath, in my experience, my body needed to feel released. So I love this question. How has being engaged in movement practices most of my life benefited me and the work that I do? It's learning how to be in a variety of positions and movements, to think laterally, not just vertically as I move, to notice that it's easy to fall into patterns. And so I have always done this thing, if I'm going to do it on the right, I got to do it on the left too. And just taking that approach to life, being a person that got into movement young, I realized that there's all kinds of ways that I can move from point A to point B physically. It's a lot more fun to get creative with that, and that translates to life. So I have learned that my body is a beacon, like a radar, an antenna that has a tremendous amount of information to share with me. And as I navigate big choices or ways of connecting with others, ways of bringing my innate gifts or my learned gifts forward into the world, I definitely listen to my body. And that's a skill that I really appreciate. I really appreciate that if I'm not quite sure, my body will tell me. And I think we lose that if we're not embodied. I think it's very common to disassociate from our own bodies. And practicing many different styles of movement art, I've learned that it's just a curiosity. And my favorite way of moving nowadays is contact improv. I love contact improv because my body comes into contact with another person, and now we're just improving. We're just moving with whatever feels good. We're both navigating for our own experience. We're both navigating for our own safety, our own pleasure, our own joy, our own stretch, our own medicine. And we're really blessed in Crestone to have some very good contact improv teachers. In fact, right after this panel, Nadia's leading a contact improv at 1, and I'm going to run over there. I got my contact improv clothes on, and I'm ready. But there is something that's really fun for me nowadays about the improv experience, because it is the authentic self, and there is no script. And after so many years of studying yoga and following the rules of the teachings, which has had, it creates that container, like Sharron mentioned, that container in which I could be free. So having the structure, but then finding the flow of what is organic inside of myself. When we get into movement as a practice, as a wellness tool, it's not long before we become emotional. It opens everything. It opens the stories that want to unravel. It takes us into the subconscious experience. It takes us where we haven't maybe been in a while, or where we want to go, but we haven't found the pathway. I'm really blessed that as a young woman coming into my 20s and getting very into yoga, I also was getting very into breath work, and I was also all my life a singer, a vocalist, and so I organically and naturally combined these three things of movement, breath, and sound. And then I got into mantras and had these like sacred codings that I could work with, and that does help. It helps to have something to focus the mind on, which gets boring just English language or whatever language we have. It's nice to have something like a mantra that has a story and a mythology and a purpose and a collective weight to it. So mantras are frequencies, vibrational frequencies that have been used for the same intention for thousands of years by thousands of people. So there's this, they have their own life force. And I think if there's anything that I can share with you as a devotee to exploring movement and using movement as medicine, and being in my mid-50s and having a body that's pain-free and that's relatively incredibly healthy, I just feel that movement is one piece of the experience for me, and that breath and sound are the other pieces. And we can think about experiences we have where even if you're just moving something heavy, you can align your body and get in that good form, and you're like, okay, I'm ready. But if you give it a good breath or a good sound, it's so much easier. Same with joy. We have moments where we see someone we love and we hug them, and that big breath is just what takes us into the heart open and all that energy that moves. So if we want to move energy in our bodies, certainly movement is a huge part. And then the breath and the sound are just the magical sparks that help us to really come in touch, no matter what we've been through, no matter where we're at, no matter what we know or we don't know. It is our birthright, like John said. And I love what you said, John, about nature, because that's my primary source. This is where I access. Even today, just sitting here, I just keep looking at the trees. And when I'm ready to come into my body and do my yoga, I'm sourcing nature as much as I possibly can. It's an incredible way to reunite with our sound, whether it's singing voice or just letting some sound out. Our breath. You just see the trees, they're breathing too. So sourcing nature as an inspiration for how am I going to move today, and how am I going to breathe, and what sound am I going to make? What sounds are coming in my practice? I really think that living in Crestone and being in a place like this, we have such a gift. Just be able to walk up the creek, find a rock where no one else is, be with the water, and let ourselves sing, let ourselves breathe, and let ourselves move.
So inspiring listening to all of the wisdom you guys are sharing. And I was thinking a lot, having the time to reflect on everything that was shared about, what that really, everything that was said really means to me. And to kind of build on what Bill talked about with these ideas of principle, finding a root, finding relaxation, finding understanding as qualities of connection and movement within ourselves. Something that's been coming up for me recently is learning to meet those principles at different spaces within myself. So when I first discovered a principle of rooting, what that meant, how it became something I had to do, then evolving myself and recognizing it can always be turned on, it can always be there, is a different psychological perception of what that really feels like. And just thinking about how each one of us, when we find our principles of alignment, we find our principles of connectivity, we find our principles of awareness and self-understanding, that's always evolving through this beautiful landscape of our learning and our expression of what John shared is like, we're here to be happy, we're here to be joyful, we're here to be expressing our greatness. And I think a lot about having an 18-month-old, having teenagers, having gone through 4 decades, being 40 in my life, and revisiting these principles, revisiting what movement means from different perspective in myself, and how there's really a never-ending story that, until we're 6 feet under or burnt in the pyre or wherever we may be evolved into the heavens, we do have this beautiful gift of a body that allows us to move, and our internal movements that are so sacred, and our external movements that really mirror what we're experiencing around us, what we relate to. So noticing for myself that when I move with my 18-month-old, it might be a little bit different than when I move with my 16-year-old. When I move with myself in the forest, it might feel a little bit different. And even going in through these different phases of our lives and our psychological maturation, our physical maturation, we're constantly evolving. And if we can stay moving in that constant evolution, we can find a revisiting of these principles over and over and over. And it really is an embodied sense of medicine, that it means to be alive. And what a blessing that something as simple as moving my arm here versus moving my arm here changes the whole consciousness of my expression and the whole sense of awareness of how I move that through my being, and allows me to awaken to even just the tiniest little thing that could change as a micro movement. As I know you guys, especially with the Tai Chi, is like the tiniest shift in the tailbone makes all the difference, or the tiniest shift in the torque conversion of that ankle before it cracks that leaf, or even just how we walk and meet each other through movement. We're constantly mirroring what's happening around us, and it's all a reflective reality to allow us to connect to ourselves deeper, but to connect to each other deeper, and connect to what John would say, that inner and outer nature mirroring our reality. And so how do we, I mean, really, what else is there? Is this beautiful container we have, and the mastery of how we move it, and how we mirror the way we move it, and then how we meet that again and again and again. And I was practicing a little qigong in the forest this morning. I was like, God, there's like never going to be something to run out of learning about what movement is and what it means to be embodied. And going back to even what Sharron said, is when we can actually be conscious of these experiences, and we can release these tensions that we hold consciously or unconsciously, and we have flow, then we can be in our hearts, and we get to see really the magic that happens. Maybe a dragonfly that lands on us while we're doing Tai Chi, or a bobcat that walks in front of us in a standing practice as we open our eyes, or just the ability to meet the heart of a little child or your mother in a way that opens potential. And those tight, tense stories that are held within us are really, they're the restrictions to connection. And so if movement is that organizing principle of interrelationship, how beautiful it is that we get this beautiful body to explore the sensual experience of allowing more connection internally and externally.
Okay, I know that we have so much time, and my last question, we might be able to take a couple questions to the audience. And you don't have to ask this question, but I was going to ask if there was a movement you want to share. But I think because we want to stay on a time frame here, because we have lots of great things coming up on the main stage, if anyone has a question for any of the presenters, and it could be a movement. If you say, hey, what movement do you think is important or anything like that, that's fine. Or another type of question, unless there's anything on the panel here you guys really want to share. I don't want to cut you off because we could probably go for weeks, right? We need to do this again, I think, yeah. Anything you guys want to share before we take it to a Q&A? No? Okay. Is there anybody that does want to have a question for anybody on the stage? Because if you don't, I can. Yes? Okay. So all we ask is you say your name, and if you have a directed question for anybody in particular on the stage, that's fine, or just a general.
My name's Scott. I'm a student of Bill's, but this question's for John. It's about the primordial Qigong. A little bit close. Oh, now you can hear me. This one's for John, about the primordial Qigong. What's the most important synchronicity that's created by the four directions and the opening?
I think I understand the question. What is the? Could you repeat again?
What's kind of the most? What links all the synchronicity? What links all of the different movements and directions together? I mean, is there like a
Could you tell?
thing that you could speak to about that?
Yeah. This is a beautiful question. This is a relatively new form that's appeared on the scene with the help of just a few people that brought over, like Michael Wynn. When I was at Wudong, it was really fun. That's where it is said to have come from originally, and Chung Sung Fung is the original founder of it. This form, just to let people know, is not really martially focused. It's focused on freeing up and liberating the energy channels, the acupuncture channels, and the extraordinary vessels, which are the rivers through which the qi flows and then feeds the other 12 basic meridians that are related to the elements and the organ systems. So this system works with also, in addition to clearing the basic 8 primary vessels, which is one of its main functions, these rivers of qi that are primary in the body. Another major function of it is to link you to the 8 fundamental powers of the Bagua, or the 8 directions. And in order to do that, you have to move clockwise and counterclockwise at the same time, which is interesting. You start out the movement facing east, then at the conclusion of the earth form part, you end up facing south. At the conclusion of that, you do the heaven form, and that ends up facing south. Then again, you open up another earth form, and you end up facing to the west, and so on until finally you end up facing back to the east. So you're moving in this way, clockwise. But as you do the form itself, you're actually moving short term in the counterclockwise direction. So you're moving clockwise and counterclockwise at the same time. It's very handy if you're trying to do a double spiral kind of movement. One of the beauties of this form is that you connect with these 8 fundamental powers of the Bagua, the powers of the east, the south, the west, the north, the northwest, the southeast, the southwest, and so on. And these fundamental powers can be absorbed. For those of you who are interested in Taoist internal alchemy, you can start with the pre-heaven sequence of the I Ching and absorb these trigram powers. By the way, there are 8 trigrams that represent these 8 powers. And very often in many of the pre-heaven, the very early sequence of the I Ching, you have the heaven aspect, the earth aspect, opposite sides of the mandala of the trigrams. And then you have Kan and Li, fire and water, on the other sides that normally we would associate with east and west. So you learn how to, as you go through the form, you learn how to absorb, honor, and absorb the powers of these 8 fundamental powers of the universe. As you know, if you practice anything with the I Ching, you put together the trigrams. You put together the trigrams in 2 pairs. You get the hexagram. And many people use the arrow stalks or the coins to actually get a synchronistic answer to maybe a question posing to the cosmos. So it's a way of moving I Ching, a trigram practice, which absorbs these universal powers. At the same time, it's clearing the 8 extraordinary vessels that are primary in the energy body and open the 12 other meridian channels that are used mostly in acupuncture and acupressure in the body, leading to good health. It's a fairly intricate system, and we're practicing it right now up at the Sacred Land Sanctuary. That's what we actually opened the Heaven Forum today. But I encourage people to explore it a bit. There's only a few teachers out there really doing this well, and we're recovering still some of the internal alchemy aspects of it. I do it by doing a deep prayer to Chung Sung Fung and the Taoist immortals, ask for them to come through and give me guidance on how to express the deeper internal alchemical aspects of this form. Bill is also, he's a passionate practitioner of this form as well. So you've got some unique opportunities here in Crystal. You have 2 people who actually are doing this practice and sharing it. We use the term Tai Chi for liberation because it liberates the energy body.
Thank you. I know we probably have a lot more questions or interests, but I just want to share that everyone here, even though they're not always just here in Crestone, please look at, because we're out of time, but please look at their bios. Look, a lot of them do a lot of work online too, virtually, and workshops here, like John's mentioned with Way of Nature. And I just wanted to share.
Unity.
Yeah. Oh, Sacred Unity as well. But we will be highlighting a lot of these folks. And at the nonprofit Sacred Unity, Sharron just said that we've started up at the Labyrinth. We definitely want to have more immersions as well with sacred movement, sacred dance, sacred breath work. So, and a lot of that will be virtual too, to just continue on what we're trying to do here at Energy Fair. So if you guys want to give just a real thanks and a great applause for everyone here. Great, very, very grateful to be here with everyone, so thank you.
I'd like to express my gratitude to Dr. Kim, my doctor, who has done so much for this community on so many levels.